Today is March 1st and we are planting our seeds. We are in Michigan, so it's very cold. There's still snow on the ground outside, but we're getting our seeds started indoors, so I'll take you along for the ride. I've got, so far, my son just had an apple, so I took some Pink Lady apple and put it in there. I also took a red pear seeds that we had just eaten as well, and some lemon seeds, which I just peeled back and I'm trying to get started because I'd love to have a lemon tree. And I just planted in the second row here marigolds. Marigolds are great for pollinators and so keeping other pests away in the garden, so I love to have some marigolds planted around my garden so we can have that going as well. And my wife wanted me to start some poppy and some Johnny Jump Up seeds, so I'm going to do those for her so she can plant them around the yard, and they're perennial, so they should come back yearly, so this will be a good investment with those. Get those started, and so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next row. Now what I've done is I have gotten one of these 72 trays, 72 pod trays, and I've done 4 cups of water in it, which you can see greatly expanded each one of these knapsacks, if you will. And so I'm just going through planting, and then we'll put our lid on it, and I'll take you on the progress as it happens in the next few weeks. So for now, stick with me. I'm going to go ahead and get the poppy seeds opened up. We'll do those next. Actually, I need to grab a couple more marigolds. This last pod didn't get filled just quite yet. So I find it helps to empty a couple of seeds out into a saucer or something shallow that you can easily grab them with. Usually about 2 to 3 seeds recommended per pod. I'm actually going with about 2 seeds per pod to get them started. Marigolds are one of those plants actually that will actually expand quite a bit once they're actually in the ground. When they're in these pods, they won't spread very much, but they grow like crazy once they're actually in the ground in some good soil. So if you want to keep them in a pot, they'll stay very nice and small, but if you end up putting them in ground, they'll spread quite a bit as well. They just bush out, they don't spread. I know nothing about poppy, as the first time I've ever planted them, so it's going to be interesting to see how they grow this year. And before I move on, I actually need to write my marigolds on one of my tags. These are homemade tags. I got this idea from another gardener on the YouTube channel. These tags, it's just a yogurt container. You take your yogurt container and cut it into thin slices and then cut off the bottom. They make great tags, and nothing like reusing and saving the environment. So, and then I'll be able to hopefully use these over and over again for years to come. I'm just writing in permanent marker so it doesn't wear off. Alright, so we've got now our marigold seeds, our tag, and so I'm going to put that back so I know that this row is marigolds. And moving on. Alright, so onto the poppies, and these ones are quite small, so I'm going to try to gently, they're very, very small seeds. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Couple sprinkled in there. Hopefully they work. I know there's lots of different seed spreaders out there. Be better for this type of seed for sure. Usually you pour them into like a little container and then you kind of sprinkle them down into there, which would probably be a lot better for this type of thing. I find that in the packets they get stuck quite easily and they don't do quite as well. So I find this to be a little bit easier method, but I think I'm going to try to get them to sprinkle out of the packet this time. Just get a couple in there. I don't think I really got any in that first one there. Alright, so now that we've got our poppy seeds done, oh, I should mention that what I did to fill this up was actually not regular water. They say you're supposed to use warm water from the tap or distilled if you can. I actually find that, big secret to gardening that a lot of people don't realize is that the best thing for your plants is a little bit of nitrate fertilizer. What I mean by that is fish tank water is the best. You hear a lot about aquaponics, so on and so forth. So I actually took scoops of water in a 20-ounce cup from my fish tank. I did 4 scoops of water from my 20-ounce fish, or from my fish tank, and I dumped it in here for that to absorb. So that way there's a lot of nutrients in this soil. So, if you don't have a fish tank, that's okay. You can still do the regular method of warm water, but I find that it helps feed the plants quite well. You got to do water changes almost weekly on most fish tanks anyways, so you might as well use that, put that water to good use, reuse it in your garden. You'll find a lot of farmers now are putting ponds near their gardens so they can utilize the water from the pond to water their gardens. I think it's a pretty neat idea. I forgot to put tags in, so let me do that now. I'm quite forgetful today. Alright, so we got our marigold. Now the next row we did was poppy. Poppy flower. It's a pretty flower there. Let's show you guys what the package looks like. Poppy flowers. Pretty. So P-O-P-P-Y. Get that tag in there before we forget. Move on to the next steps there. Find it easiest if I lift the pot out and then put it back in with the package there. This one did come with a couple of ones there, different ones, but I knew I was going to be doing way too many rows for that to be enough, so that's why I went with my homemade ones, and I'll save these other great tags there for another project. Alright, so Johnny Jump Up is the other tag I need to write there. Those are very, very pretty flowers. Like I said, I've never used those ones before, or these flowers before. Generally, most of the time, most people think about these as pod starters are mostly for vegetables, things like that. A lot of flowers they direct sow, but I had a lot of luck doing this with marigolds last year. My son wanted to. So I ended up doing that, and I find this is a great seed starter as well for those flower enthusiasts who really want to get their garden going, or even their yard going, but they don't want to spend a lot of money. This is a good inexpensive way of really doing that. Seed packet for a couple of bucks. I believe this actually got at Meijer for $8. It was on sale last week for $7, but unfortunately missed the sale on that one. Didn't get to it in time. But you can find lots of sales on these all year round, or almost all year round. They really go on sale end of season, and it's great to grab these for the next year if you have a place to store them. But so these would be a great place if you're just wanting to get flowers started, but you don't want to buy them. You have the ability to plant, start them indoors. Then hard them off a little bit, and then you can plant them in the spring and have nice flower beds. So that's kind of what we're going for. We're going to start a new flower area alongside our window, and wanted to get some perennials that we can get to come back every year. So that's what I'm hoping to get started here. So alright, now I'm going to move on to my peppers, and I have 2 different varieties. I have these grand bell peppers, which I'm going to go ahead and do, and then I also save the top of my green pepper that I had cut up. So saved it in the refrigerator. It's been there a couple of weeks. I don't know if these seeds will still be viable, but I figured why not? It's free at that point, right? So had a good delicious dinner with them, and I did grow my own green peppers from seed like this last year. I know a lot of people will say you can just plant that directly in the ground and that'll grow right up, which I thought about doing, but like I said, there's still snow on the ground and it's spring. I want to get started, right? So almost spring. So I'm going to do those. I'm going to take a couple of seeds off those, do a row, and I'm going to do a row of these ones I had purchased from the store. And I save my seeds in a Ziploc bag year round, so you'll notice I do have some that are already open, like this, the tomato variety we're going to be doing. So that way, whatever you don't use this year, you can still use next year. So I'm not going to plant all of these, obviously. That means I'll have some to put back in the baggie for next year, or if these ones don't do well, I can direct sow into the ground this spring. So, all right, so take some of these out my platter here, and let's say bell mixed color. All right. We will do that in this row here. Get started with our seeds here. Just take my finger and poke a little indent into each of these. You're supposed to make sure you peel back the cloth that's kind of on there, mesh net, if you will. So a good way to do that is just kind of poke your finger in there. Then I like to pinch it back together, make sure that the soil kind of covers up your seeds again for you. So usually I'll go ahead and drop the seeds into all of them, and then go back and do that as the last step before moving on to the next row. Well, these trays are designed, they give you instructions on them too. If you only want to do like one pot at a time, you don't have to do them all at once, or you can do all of them at once. So I'm choosing to do all of them at once, but if you're, if you find it cheaper to buy the larger tray and you don't have enough that you want to do all at once right now, these pods are like tiny little cubes when you get started. You can just pull them right out, no problem, set them aside, and then do your tray individually, and that way you can stagger your planting if you want, still use the same tray. Once you transplant these, you can end up going ahead and moving on to the next step. So, alright, so we've got those pepper seeds sown. Now this one's going to be a little bit trickier. I'm going to pause you just for a second while I go grab a knife to scrape these seeds off. Alright, we're back here. I'm going to take this out here, and what I'd like to do is just take and scrape these seeds here onto my platter, get a couple of seeds off of there while I can. It should be enough, and set that aside. Now I'm going to take and start my next row here of seeds. So we've got a couple of seeds here. Now previously when I planted these seeds, I had actually let them dry out first, so this is actually kind of a test for me to see if they'll grow. Haven't been wet inside that bag in the refrigerator for a while. My assumption would be yes, that they don't necessarily need to dry out in order to germinate, if you will. But I'm hoping. We'll see how this project goes. Worst case, like I said, it's free. I'm reusing seeds from a pepper that we had eaten for dinner. So, the downside to that is, it's bought at a grocery store. You don't know how organic those seeds actually are. But again, all these other seeds I bought directly from Walmart and or Home Depot. So if you really want, to grow your own organic seeds, you should really try to find a reputable source. I know My Gardener sells seeds online, and that's a good source. Something like that is always nice. But this year I decided to try to be as inexpensive as possible to try to get this garden going again for me this year and provide good food for my family. So I'm going to write green pepper here. And we'll move on to cucumbers. Everybody loves cucumbers. I actually put my garden right on the outside of my fence, so that way I could actually use my fence to trellis my cucumbers. Funny enough, the cucumbers will grow through the holes in the metal fence, and my dogs end up eating the cucumbers that are on the other side of the fence. It's quite funny. But it works out pretty well. They get a good snack, and there's nothing wrong with it for them. It doesn't harm them at all, and still it keeps the harvest down if we need it to. So you really can get quite a variety of peppers out. But I found I really like these kind. I'm going with the Burpee brand. It's a what they call a burpless hybrid. Don't ask me what that means. I have no idea. But I found that they were the tastiest out of the couple of varieties I grew last year. Actually, a neighbor had given me some that were already started, and I planted them, and I absolutely love them. So I'm going to go with that variety again this year. And I found that the kids loved them, and the wife loved them, and I had so many last year that I ended up actually giving away a ton to the neighbors. So we're going to try to cut down the amount of plants that we have as far as cucumbers this year, because we don't want to be wasteful. But, it's always nice to give your neighbors something too. They see you working on this year round, and maybe they don't have room to grow themselves. So, we're going to go ahead and try that here. So, but we're just going to scale back a little bit. So I'm actually going to just keep going with the 2 seeds per pod here. And the one thing I will say is that these ones are dried out, so there's some thought to that seeds you get in seed packets are always dried out, so maybe my green peppers won't do too hot this year. But like I said, we planted that other pepper variety, and I can always, if these aren't doing well in a couple of weeks, I can always get some replacement pods and start a new row. They do sell these pods individually as a kind of a replacement, or I can direct sow into some soil pots, that sort of a thing. No shortage of water to use from the fish tank, and like I said, I didn't plant all my seeds. I'm not putting all my eggs into one basket, if you will. Alright, so we've got our cucumbers planted. Let me actually write on my tag here. I like to put what type of cucumber they are, because inevitably you always forget and somebody asks you, and then you go to you have to go running in the house to find your seed packet, and that's in hopes that you didn't throw it out. So it's a great idea, if you have the room on your tag, to write what kind of cucumber it is, or variety of tomato, or what have you. So that way it's good, just a good habit to get into. Alright, so we've got our tag for that row. Alright, so one of the things that I actually had bought from plant and managed to kill, which is fine, as everybody finds quite ironic, is rosemary. So I promised the wife that I would try to get rosemary going again this year, but what I'm going to do is, rosemary is one of those that can grow gigantic and really take over an area if you let it. It's a perennial, it'll come back every year. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start a row of rosemary here. But with that, I am planning to make sure that with the rosemary, I only do about half a row to get it started, and then I'm going to do half a row of dill, I think, and then from there, what I'm going to do is these are going to eventually get put in the greenhouse. Greenhouses will be year round where I can grow this, and I can keep control that it doesn't take over my yard. I'm going to do dill, mint, and rosemary all in the greenhouse this year, and just I have some raised beds in my greenhouse, that's where these will all get planted. They won't stay in pots, although you can keep rosemary in pots. Plenty of people do. My intention is to keep the rosemary actually in ground in the greenhouse. So same with the dill and the mint. So I'm going to try to create a little area for that. I also will be doing some butter crunch lettuce and arugula in the greenhouse. The butter crunch lettuce did really well in the greenhouse last year, so I'm looking to get that going again in the greenhouse. I also did cucumbers and tomatoes in the greenhouse last year, and it's a smaller greenhouse. It's one of these 6x8 from Harbor Freight, and I find it to be fantastic. I wish I had a bigger one, but unfortunately, that sort of a setup is too small, really, that I found for the tomatoes, and the cucumber plant really took over everything. So I'm going to do cucumbers and tomatoes strictly outside of the greenhouse this year. So it'll be interesting to see how everything does this year. If it doesn't do real well, that might be my ability to convince the wife that I need a bigger greenhouse. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so I got rosemary. Actually, I only did 2 pods. Now each of these rows, as you can see, has 2, 4, 6. What I think I'm going to do is grab the mint seeds, and I think I'm going to do 2 mint, 2 dill, 2 rosemary, because I really want 2 sections of tomatoes, I think. I really don't want to go overboard with tomatoes. So see, you should really plan this out before you start. It's very important. One of the things that you find about gardening is it's very important to plan ahead in your garden before you start planting. And I did kind of plan ahead on these rows, but I think they kind of got away from me as far as what I was planning. So I'm going to pause for a moment, rethink this, and I'll be right back. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do is I really want this to be successful with the rosemary, the dill, and the mint. So just to take a chance of possibly one of these pods not really going, I'm going to actually do this full row here with rosemary, do another full row of dill, and then I'm going to do a full row of mint. And then I am going to shorten the amount of tomato plants. Tomato plants aren't hard to grow. Generally speaking, you plant the seeds that happens to grow. But I can always direct sow those in the yard or in the garden if I need to. So what I think I'll do is I will do 1 beefsteak and then 1 cherry here, and that way I'm pretty sure I'll have a pretty good crop there. I had so many tomatoes last year that I was actually removing them and transplanting them into my backyard as a kind of an experiment to see if they would vine up the shed. It didn't work out, but regardless, I had so many tomatoes last year that tomato plants last year that I find that I'm really wanting to scale back this year and only have 4 of each type of plant. So I figure if I do a row of 6 of each, I should be fine with only yielding 4 of each type of plant in the long run. So I'm going to go ahead and continue this. I'm going to put my tag in for the rosemary first, and then I'm going to continue this row with rosemary seeds. Rosemary. All right, so I already did the first 2 pods with rosemary there, and obviously that was these seeds were actually very hard to pick up and transplant, so I'm going to try to shake them out of the packet itself. I actually have an experiment going where I have rosemary trying to grow in the top of the fish tank as pumping up water and so on and so forth. And that's only been going for a couple of days, so I may end up with more rosemary than I can handle here, but at least I'll have some to choose from. And if all else fails, I'll go buy a plant from the store and plant it directly in the greenhouse to keep my wife happy. But I figure if they could grow it to start, then I can grow it. My problem is I think I put the rosemary through transplant shock to begin with. I was growing it out of the top of the fish tank when we first brought it home, and it did okay. But then I didn't harden it off when I took it outside, and I planted it into a pallet box planter, which didn't work out too well. So I believe I just killed it from transplant shock. They say you're supposed to take these outside, harden them off, which means just putting them outside in the sunlight as it warms up a little bit, bringing them in overnight because it's still cooler. Do that for a week to 2 weeks before you really take them outside, and then transplant them. So what I'll be doing to kind of harden things off is I'll actually, once they're ready to kind of leave the house, I'll actually be moving them to the greenhouse, and I'll open the door during the day to kind of get the weather in there and harden them off, and then at night I'll close it up, and so that'll really, hopefully that'll result in what we're looking for before we transplant all these things directly to the ground. So, but you can transplant these pods specifically to the ground. That's what they're actually for, these burlap sacks or these net mesh sacks. I don't think they're burlap, obviously. So, all right, so we're going to move on. Enough of that. We're going to move on to planting our dill here. And so dill is another herb that we like to use. Mix it with mayonnaise. It tastes amazing as a kind of a sauce. It's good on your burgers. So it's another herb that we'd like to keep in house. And so we're gonna try to grow some of that. I actually got it to grow quite well in the greenhouse last year, but I ended up transplanting it to the pallet that I was trying to make. I was trying to do like one of those wall pallets that you see sometimes people do projects with, and I think it just, the watering and temperatures of the time weren't right, so it just didn't end up working out in my favor. So we're going to try to actually directly put it in the greenhouse and just leave it there. So sometimes, guys, when things are going right, just let them be, and that's the thing. We're always trying to perfect nature and, make it better or make it our way. And nature's going to take its own course. And sometimes the best thing you can do for nature is allow nature to do its thing. So in this particular case, it had really done well by itself, and I tried to move it somewhere else. And you put plants through shock. That's a situation that nobody wants to have happen, but it does, and it ends up killing off your plants, or the atmosphere becomes different because you didn't do it right. And so I find that if you just let nature do its own thing, it'll be a lot better for you in the long run. In particular, a lot of people are very big advocates of direct sowing as a result of that. Sow it directly into the ground and allow nature to either grow or not grow based on a direct sow. And a lot of people don't prefer the transplant method, which is this. I can say that I really am a huge advocate for direct sow, honestly, but I've had success with the transplant method. And if you don't want to lose all your crops, and honestly, let's be honest, if you're into gardening, if you're watching this long, and you're actually into gardening, that means that you are eager. Come February, you're itching. You're already planning out your garden. You're wondering what crops that you can grow this year. It's an exciting experience. So for those of us who can't wait for the snow to melt then this is a good way to get started in your garden without having to wait. So all right, I'm gonna be right back. I gotta actually, the mint is upstairs. It was a gift for my wife from the kids for Christmas, she hasn't started it yet. So I'm gonna actually run upstairs and grab those seeds. I forgot to grab them, and I'll be right back. Okay, guys, we are back. I actually have that mint here. So this was a Christmas gift for my wife here. Actually, funny enough, came from Five Below. Many of you have Five Belows near you. This was a Christmas gift that the kids wanted to get my wife. She loves mint in her water. We did have some mint in our garden last year, but again, it didn't end up doing too well. So we're going to try again with growing it in the greenhouse itself. So what I'm going to do here is, you can actually grow it right in these type of pods that it comes with. It comes with a little soil pod, basically. I believe you just get it wet. And then this type of material here, it's like a cardboard material, if you will. You plant it right into the ground. A lot of people don't know that. They believe you actually have to transplant from this. But you can plant this right into the ground. It's biodegradable. That's why they make those like that. So it's a neat little thing to have for getting seeds started. We're not going to use that today because we have these. So we're actually, what we're going to do with mint is, this is the mint seed packet that came inside. So we're going to try to get all that mint right in here. Unfortunately, it just says mint. So it doesn't tell me specifically what type of mint it is. So I would have loved to had my other chocolate mint that I had last year, and the other one was a pineapple mint, very delicious. So I would have loved to have that, but we're going to try to get this started. And one nice thing about mint is it smells amazing, so it's going to be nice walking in the greenhouse on a hot day and smelling that mint. And it's great when it's in your drinks and you make water, put it directly in your water. Let's see if we can get the mint going this style. So, all right. So, let's see here. Wow. All right. Well, I don't think you guys can really see, but it's kind of shorted the seeds there. So, quite interesting. There's really looks like there's not a lot of seeds in here. So, I'm going to attempt to get these seeds out by opening this a little bit more here. They're very, very tiny seeds. As we get into it a little bit more, it looks like there may be more of them, just not a whole lot. So we'll see if we can actually, I may have to actually go to the store and get some more mint seeds. This is a little bit not exactly what I was hoping for. So I've never used these ones from Five Below before. I have used, these type of starter kits to get things going. I believe I've done strawberries with those, and I will say I'm not a huge fan of those style. All right, well, we got enough to fill up the pods with 1 or 2 seeds each. We'll see how it goes. I mean, I'm not, I will be honest, I'm not overly confident in that one, but you never know. Pleasantly surprised, right? So the other nice part about starting with these style pods is, that the stuff that actually grows out of them generally is going to be actually your plant. One of the things that a lot of people say is, why can't I just go out to my yard and dig up some dirt and put it in here and plant some seeds? Well, you can, obviously, but one of the things, or you go to the local store and buy a 2 cubic feet worth of topsoil, right? Well, topsoil, things like that, they don't have a whole lot of nutrients in them, which is one of the reasons why you would want to start with this type of thing. They haven't been amended with some good broken down type of soil, and also they don't pick out the bad stuff. And I guess what I mean by that is, a lot of times you start growing stuff like that, you end up growing more weeds than you do actually growing plants. So that's part of the issue with actually growing specifically in topsoil. Not that it's bad to maybe top off something like this, but it's definitely not going to be helpful because you'll end up growing more weeds than you do plants. So with growing this style, you actually end up having knowing specifically that the plants that are growing in here when they start sprouting are what you planted. So that makes a big difference. So I actually ran out of my yogurt container labels, and that's what I was just looking for. So I'm going to move on to using the ones that came specifically with it. They're a nice little tag. Definitely nothing wrong with them. A little bit smaller surface area to write on, so if you write big like I do, unfortunately, then it's definitely going to be a little bit more difficult. So it's great for these smaller words like mint. So, all right, stick that in there. We know this row is mint. Awesome. So next I am going to plant some beefsteak. Everybody loves a good beefsteak tomato. I found that they grew pretty well last year. I didn't get the harvest that I would have really liked. With pruning, I'll do some videos this year on pruning your tomato plants. But I started my garden really late last year. I actually didn't plant until June. I didn't transplant anything until almost July. So I still got a great harvest last year, but I didn't get as much harvest as I would have really liked. And another thing I did late was I kept the marigolds in the the containers too long. So did they thrive and take off after I transplanted them? They absolutely did. But I found that I didn't get attract as many pollinators to my garden as I did after I planted them. So one thing that I would suggest is, unless you're planning to self-pollinate, which My Gardener has a great video on self-pollination, but unless you're planning to self-pollinate, I really recommend, some type of good smelling flowers, good things to really attract those pollinators to that area. All that to say that the beefsteaks didn't quite do as well as I wanted to last year. I did get some great, enough to feed my family, which is plenty. Sadly, only my wife and I eat tomatoes, and even then she doesn't particularly care for them on anything but her burgers, and she'll eat them regular with some salt, but she doesn't care for tomatoes. We don't can tomatoes or anything like that. I know a lot of people do. I don't know that enough about that to say that beefsteak's the right variety for you. But I will tell you, with tomatoes, 1 or 2 seeds is plenty to really get you started. If you're only looking to do for a small family of 4 like we have, you really don't need much more than 1 to 2 plants, because you will start to get that variety, that harvest that you're looking for. If you're just looking to feed your family, now if you're trying to go to market with them, sell them, of course, but like I said before, tomatoes are that plant that they can do really well. There are varieties of tomatoes that come back year after year. There's tomatoes that are determinate, indeterminate, things like that. I'm not going to get into that in this video today, but identifying those type of varieties. I believe this beefsteak variety is a determinate. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to do some more research on this variety. I didn't read it over much. I just grabbed it in the store and said, all right, it's beefsteak, I will take it. Now, the difference between that just means whether it's going to grow to a certain height and stop, and just fruit, or is it going to continue to grow super tall? And these ones in particular are an indeterminate variety of red cherry tomatoes. Now, these particular ones I did grow last year. This packet's open from last year. I grabbed another packet of it this year because I didn't realize how many seeds I actually have left in there. Quite a bit, actually. So I probably won't even end up opening this new packet today, which is great. So that's great that I can save that, or I can return it to the store. But for $1.50, you might as well save it for years to come. Now, this particular variety is delicious. I got so many cherry tomatoes off of this. I believe I had this variety in the cherry 100 kind. It is exactly like it sounds. You get like 100 cherries on there, right? Cherry tomatoes, that is. And I got so many of these that I actually started saving this year my strawberry containers, because I find those strawberry containers you get from the store, those plastic strawberry containers, are fantastic to put these in. I was taking them to work, handing them out. My wife was taking them to work every day as a snack and her lunch. And, you know, we had bowls full of these. And a lot of people like to set them out in a bowl on the counter, so on and so forth. That's good if you're going to eat them right away. What you find is after a day or so, you're going to start smelling like, what does that smell? All those tomatoes at the bottom of that bowl aren't getting eaten, and then you're filling it up and so on and so forth, and it's all of a sudden you're getting fruit flies. It's really, those tomatoes will rot at the bottom of that bowl if you just leave them in a bowl on your counter. So it's best that you have like an aerated container, something like that. If you can keep them in the fridge, even better. But the best thing you can do for yourself is not overextend your garden. I know it's very exciting to really get your garden going, but it's bad when you just have too much crop that you don't have enough, that you don't have any room to put it. So you could leave it on the vine, but that actually, there's said that can really harm your plant by leaving the fruit there. Or, you know, one of the things that leaving it on the vine, eventually it falls off the vine, or rots on the vine, one or the other. And all the nutrients, water, things like that are still going to that tomato, that plant. So what happens is it's not producing a lot of new growth. It's not producing a lot of new tomatoes. So you end up with a bunch of bad tomatoes on the vine that you can't eat. And when you do want to collect some more tomatoes to eat, you don't have any because it stopped producing those new tomatoes. So it's best to pick off those ones, whether you're going to eat them or not, and you know, either compost them is a great way to do that if you're into composting, or you know, maybe bury. It's best to either compost them or maybe bury them in a different section of your garden, so that way you can you know, continue to give that back to the soil. Now, the one thing I will say about tomato plants, if you're going to bury them, is they're pretty hardy. They will grow. So if you plant a tomato somewhere in your garden, be prepared that you could sprout a tomato plant as a result of it. So as long as you're planning to weed them back out or something, you could regrow. Now eventually the frost will kill them, so on and so forth. There are varieties of tomatoes that come back yearly, perennial. I don't know what they are, I apologize, but you could look that up. My mom says that every year her tomatoes end up coming back, specifically her cherry kind. So the ones that actually fall off the ground, vine and fall to the ground, they end up sprouting again next year. But she lives in a different zone. She lives down in Tennessee, so obviously the weather climate's there. She gets a lot less snow. Frost lifts a lot sooner, so I don't expect any of that with my garden this year, obviously. So I'm starting fresh. I'm going to amend all the soil, and I'll take you through that journey a little bit as well when we do that. Obviously too cold to do that now. So let me write on my tags here, beef steak. So I want to make sure that I know that these are my beefsteak kinds. I don't want to get the cherry and the beefsteak mixed up because I want to make sure that I get them planted in their own sections. Now I am going to put them in the same bed, but I'm going to have them in a little separated. Like I said, I'm only looking to have about 4 plants of each. So I'm going to kind of create a 4 corners type of situation with each of those plants with the proper amount of staking. And I like to put, like I said before, the type of variety in there. So I'm going to name these ones red cherry. All right. So Alright, now we got our labels in there. We've got all of our tags in there. The next step is to throw the lid on. Now, before I throw that lid on, what I like to do is, since these have been out for a little while now, maybe about a half hour as I'm starting to plant here, I like to take my water bottle. Again, this is full of fish water. This is actually how I'm going to water these plants as I spray them. Now, you're not supposed to have to water your plants again until you start to see sprouts. Then you take the lid off and you water them as needed at that point once you start to see some browning on these. But since we did get all these now in the soil, this nice moist soil, all the seeds are planted, everything's kind of covered up. I like to take and spray it down one more time before putting that lid on, kind of create that space to raise the humidity level, if you will, in these. Now, they say you're also supposed to put this in indirect sunlight until those sprouts happen. So, but one other thing that I recently heard is that tea bags are actually full of nitrates and great for your soil. So what I'm going to do here is you can actually plant your seeds directly in these, and then it's supposed to grow. Now I'm testing that in another section here. Unfortunately, I haven't had any luck with that. So what I'm going to do instead with these tea bags, I've been saving them, is I am actually going to cut them open and kind of just sprinkle them on, maybe the nitrates from the tea that way. I'm just going to go ahead and rip the top right off of there, set that over there for right now. And I'm just going to kind of sprinkle out the tea onto my crop here. Will it do anything? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I'll have Earl Grey mint for all I know, right? You know, but what I'm looking to do is kind of reuse nature, right? So I don't expect to grow any tea or anything silly like that, right? These are used tea bags. But waste not, want not, right? So I'm trying all the different life hacks, different things that you can do as a farmer or a gardener or whatever you want to be, to really kind of give back, to reuse the things that we take for granted every day. We end up throwing these away anyways, so why not kind of reuse these things here, maybe get a little bit of nutrient boost out of them, even if it's just a little bit. You know, like I said, I'm not even hitting everything here as I'm trying to do this. It's kind of, but you know, maybe as the nutrients get the water absorbed from the humidity, maybe the nutrients will spread a little bit. I don't know. Also, you know, maybe as well, that was weird. I accidentally dropped it on top of the little pellet that was in there, and the water from the tea bag expanded the soil in there. Well, I guess I'll have to find something to plant in there and test it out. So as I was saying, the tea, I'm also saving coffee grounds. These are the type of things that you can really do to, you know, give back. The worms love to eat coffee grounds. The acidity in there is awesome for them and their digestion tract. So not fresh coffee, but used coffee grounds. So I'll be, you know, as the spring starts to do thaw, I'll be sprinkling my coffee grounds around the base of all my plants. What that also does is helps repel some of the other insects and things like that. So, all right, so that's about what we can do there. Like I said, I'm going to give this one last spray here. Just, you know, I'm not trying to soak everything. They're already wet. But, you know, this is good water for them and get started. So just give it one good quick layer as we get done with that. And I'm just going to clean up my mess here. And we're going to throw our lid that came with it right on there. Everything's nice, neatly labeled. And that's it. So, tip my camera up here. This has been Gardening Here with Creations by DX. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. If you like this video, please share it out. I appreciate you watching. Thanks for your time.